I think it's safe to say that for anyone who saw the first Matrix film when it was originally released, it left a pretty big impact on you afterwards. I was 13 when the first movie came out, and I can remember being on school holidays and seeing it with my best friend at the time. Eventually I saw the movie 3 more times, and when it was announced they'd be working on a trilogy as well as a video game and an anime that also tied into the new films, well, it was hard not to get excited. As a pretty noteworthy example of transmedia storytelling, the conclusion to the Matrix trilogy would include the 2 sequels, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Then on the side of that, you also had the animated films compiled in the Animatrix compilation, and case in point, the Enter the Matrix video game. Now with the Animatrix short films, most of them were kinda garbage in terms of the writing, though at least they did have a decent sense of polish and were in line with the universe that the Wachowskis had set up. Enter the Matrix, however, does have a lot to do with the main story, but it's just that it's a textbook example of a game being rushed and hurried along to meet a release date, and as such, it ended up being a goddamn mess. Developed by Shiny Entertainment, the guys responsible for the awesome Earthworm Jim series and MDK, it was a game that served as a side story to the events that unfolded in the second film, with certain key moments from the movies having repercussions in the game, but also certain actions the player had to complete also tying in with the main characters in the films. You're given the choice to play as either a character named Ghost, portrayed by Anthony Brandon Wong, or Niobe, portrayed by Jada Pinkett Smith. And both characters have somewhat similar campaigns, with a few key differences here and there throughout certain missions. Gameplay-wise, Enter the Matrix has a mix of shooting and melee combat, with both of these varying in polish and mechanics. Now, the melee combat is simple on the surface, but also kind of surprisingly deep. You've either got a punch or a kick attack, and holding down a directional button and pressing either of these will activate a different kind of attack. So press forward and kick, for instance, and you'll do a roundhouse, but press left and kick and you'll do a sweep. Likewise with punching things, you can trigger different attacks depending on the direction you're holding. And what makes this kind of cool is that you can chain these attacks together in any single way you want. And then whenever you're in focus mode, which is the game's way of integrating bullet time, it changes the way enemies react to these attacks as well as the potency of the attack itself. On top of that, you can also disarm enemies, which has its own unique animation depending on the weapon they're holding, and if you try to disarm someone with your own weapon equipped, your character's going to simply execute them with the equipped weapon instead of disarming them. And again, this is unique to the weapon you're using. And if that's not enough, you can also interact with the environment in certain situations, running up a nearby wall if you activate focus at the right time, or often using the wall as leverage and doing this badass looking jump kick, kicking someone so violently in the face that they do this cool looking spin before slamming into the ground. Shooting things is pretty basic in that the game just kind of randomly locks onto whatever enemies it deems to be closest, and you can pretty freely run around, firing liberally and hitting what you're locked onto like 99% of the time. Like the films, you can do these cool looking cartwheels, you can run up walls or just leap back and forth like you're in a John Woo film, unloading your guns into someone at the same time. Using focus like it's going out of style is pretty much a necessity because you get killed super quickly in this game from gunfire. It can be a bit repetitive by the end of the game after you've done that slow motion cartwheel for the 50th time, but you're always able to mix it up between melee and shooting, so it's never really going to feel that stale. Gotta say though, the controls are janky as all hell, and there's numerous little bugs and glitches that you're likely to encounter, but when you get the hang of the whole thing, it just becomes incredibly fun. Gunning down a couple of SWAT with dual pistols before running up a wall and grabbing a shotgun from another one, then blasting him is just immensely satisfying. But where Enter the Matrix really shines, though, is the way it's connected itself to the movies. Taking place right after the events of the short film, The Last Flight of the Osiris, the game opens with either Ghost or Niobe breaking into a post office to steal the package that was dropped off by the Osiris captain, which reveals the machine's intent to drill into the city of Zion and kill off the remaining human resistance. And this is also part of what sets the story in motion in the Matrix Reloaded film, and you'll probably remember that scene where everyone's just standing around in the dimly lit sewers, wearing their trendy looking European leather jackets and sunglasses. What's with the sunglasses? But what made this game so enticing back in the day was that you got to see all these little events that happened before and after the movie scenes, and see how these side characters escaped from certain situations. During that aforementioned scene in the sewers where the place is ambushed by the new upgraded agents, as Ghost or Niobe, you then have to escape the sewer system, helping out other resistance members along the way and taking out SWAT teams that get in your way. You'll take part in the iconic highway chase, catching up to the speeding truck in the nick of time to catch Morpheus on the bonnet of Niobe's car. And later in the game, you'll break into a power plant and be directly responsible for cutting the power long enough for Neo to meet up with the architect for that extremely pretentious and drawn out scene from the end of the film. And this is the kind of thing that makes the game so appealing, especially if you're into the movie, is just seeing how your actions have a direct impact on the characters from the films. I mean, it's more than just going from mission to mission because you're always at a higher level having an effect on the other characters in the same universe. And I can't really think of any other single game that's ever done this so well. I mean, I don't think it's ever been done at all. Path of Neo is another Matrix game that does come to mind, but that game was mostly following the events of the film and didn't really do its own thing as much, so I'm not sure you can compare it. Aside from that though, Enter the Matrix has a lot of unique and cool scenarios that kind of stand by themselves. There's plenty of times where you're running away from agents, and just like the movies, these guys pretty much just kick the living shit out of anyone who's not Neo. So what do? Well, you run your ass off. The first time you encounter them is on a rooftop as you're trying to extract after the first mission, and it kind of mirrors that opening scene from the first film, when Trinity is trying to make her escape as well, as you're leaping across the rooftops and avoiding police officers at the same time. You are able to actually kill them under certain circumstances, though most of the time you're just better off running away like a little bitch. The biggest problem with the story though is that none of these characters are really all that likable. Jada Pinkett Smith, for instance, just has this resting bitch face thing going on pretty much the entire game, and even the guy who plays Ghost just comes off as incredibly dull and boring. There's like one or two jokes throughout the entire game, and they're not even all that funny. I mean, I know the Matrix films aren't like the Three Stooges or anything, but they did have those little moments of humor here and there to break up the tension.
Only thing you know about me is I was about to kick your ass.
Ghost and Niobe just go through the entire game with these robotic-looking poker faces. Even the scene when Niobe's getting kissed by Persephone lacks any real kind of emotion or response. I'm not expecting her to stick her tongue down Monica Bellucci's throat or anything, I mean that'd be nice, but she just kind of stands there with her dead fish lips and her stupid sunglasses.
Oh God, that was awful.
That's my biggest issue with the films too, is how every single character tried to act all stoic and pensive all the time. I mean, look, it made sense for Neo to do it. The guy had risen above what normal people were capable of, and he literally saw the world in code. But when every single character in the Matrix universe acts this way, it just robs the scenes of any kind of emotion. Everyone just stands around looking serious and grim, wearing their dark clothing and sunglasses. Seriously, what's with the fucking sunglasses? Maybe there's supposed to be some kind of irony there or something, that the human characters fighting back against machines could almost pass off as being machine-like in how inhuman they are. But if that's the case, it was certainly lost on me, and overall it just makes for some pretty boring and unlikable protagonists.
Whatever's in that box cost Thaddeus his life and the lives of his crew. And I have a feeling if we don't get to it first, it's gonna cost us a whole lot more.
Then there's the problems with the gameplay. Now, as I said, this was a rushed game, and rushed I think is a perfect word to sum the whole thing up. Visually, the game looks pretty faithful to the source material, the characters look like their real life counterparts, and it's even got that green tint over everything that we saw in the movies as well. The problem though is that it just looks like garbage, even on the PC. Outside of the janky controls, you'll just notice how the frequent cinematics lack any kind of polish whatsoever. Some of the animations during these just look really sloppy, and there's lots of times when the sound design is just completely missing, lacking any real ambient or sound effects. It's not uncommon to see the same looking NPC used 4 or 5 times in a single cinematic, often right next to each other, because I guess they just didn't have enough time to make more character models. The driving sections are arguably broken. All of these just involve either driving in a very specific direction if you're playing as Niobe, and riding shotgun as Ghost and firing at your pursuers with an MP5. In these missions, you can quite literally avoid taking damage from enemies if you simply don't look at them. In a few of these, you're being pursued by agents or other characters from the movies, and as long as you've got your back to them, they simply cannot damage you. At least not enough to kill you. When you destroy cars, you'll notice the way the flaming wreckages look like tissue boxes, and defy the laws of physics as they weightlessly float up into the sky or just bounce around. A lot of the boss fights just boil down to activating focus mode and using the hardest hitting attacks you've got, because your regular attacks can be easily evaded by the AI. Then all you can really do is just run around like a jackass until your focus meter recharges. And that exaggerated running animation the characters do when sprinting at full tilt, flinging their arms up, almost makes it look like the Benny Hill theme should be playing in the background at the same time. Then of course there's the moments in the game where you've got to escort an NPC and often protect them from enemy attacks, and some of these just honestly boil down to luck. Luck in the sense that the enemy AI gives you a break, allowing the friendly AI to not get their asses handed to them. I think what hurts most about Enter the Matrix is that you realise it could have genuinely been a really good game if they just had a bit more time to work on it. It is still definitely playable though, despite how half-assed it can often feel. But if they just had had a few more months to make everything really refined and hone the controls a little bit more, I think this game could have genuinely been a masterpiece. Like a lot of older games that were notorious at launch, its crappiness has kind of been overstated, and I think blown out of proportion a fair bit. Overall, it's not the worst game ever made, but it sure is one of the most disappointing considering the potential it truly had. I was surprised at how well it ran on Windows 7 though, and also the fact that it was so cheap to get my hands on. So taking the red pill isn't the worst outcome, just expect there to be a few glitches along the way.
Well, it's nice to have something to look forward to.
Indeed it is.